HFY Vanguard, one spark of human will can ignite the galaxy, and that spark ignites now. Commander Gail Harper had long since stopped pretending that life aboard the Nexus station was glamorous. From the brochures Earth Command distributed back home, one might think the place was a shining jewel in the Galactic Alliance, a beacon of cooperation between species. In reality, Nexus hung in the void like a tarnished coin, its metallic rings groaning with every rotation. The engineers had patched its energy system so many times that Gail sometimes wondered how it still held together. 6 months into his 2-year contract, he was already counting the days until he could breathe Earth's air again. He crouched beside a humming converter in Sector 7, sweat trickling down his temples despite the recycled chill in the atmosphere. The machine throbbed with blue light, brighter than it should have been. Gail muttered a curse under his breath and tightened the final bolt with his pneumatic wrench. The glow softened, but the heat radiating from the casing warned him this was a temporary fix. "Damn converter's running hot again," he grumbled, wiping grease from his cheek with the back of his glove. "Hold together, you old beast. Just hold together." The communicator clipped to his belt crackled before he could catch his breath. "Harper, report to Docking Bay 3. Trade delegation just came in power coupling issue." He sighed, pushed himself upright, and gathered his tools. "On my way." Docking Bay 3 was alive with activity by the time he arrived. Cargo droids rolled in orderly lines hauling containers marked with foreign glyphs. And there, waiting with imperious patience, stood the delegation from Vidia. Gail had read the files, newly allied with the Galactic Council, technologically advanced humanoid in appearance, but with striking features that made them unmistakable. Still, no amount of reading prepared him for the sight of the woman waiting at the base of the sleek, emerald-hued vessel. Her suit clung to her form like liquid metal, every movement accentuating the grace of muscles beneath. Skin of smooth green shimmered faintly under the docking bay lights, as though holding its own source of luminescence. Long silver hair fell over her shoulders like poured mercury strands, catching every glimmer from the overhead panels. She turned as he approached, and her eyes, deep violet, laced with flecks of gold, caught his and held them effortlessly. "You are the engineer?" she asked, voice low melodic, touched with an accent he couldn't place. "Commander Gail Harper," he answered, automatically extending a hand, though he half expected the gesture to be ignored. "At your service." For a moment she only studied the offered hand as if dissecting its purpose. Then she placed her own in his. Warm, soft yet textured like fine suede. A spark passed through him as their palms met. He almost pulled away out of surprise, but forced himself to maintain composure. "I am Liriana," she said, "first diplomatic envoy of Viridia." Their eyes lingered longer than etiquette demanded. Gail cleared his throat, gesturing toward the ship. "So what's the problem?" "The coupling," she explained, leading him toward the gleaming connection port where the vessel linked to the station grid. "Our engineers attempted to modify it, but the frequencies misalign. The result is instability." Gail crouched, already scanning the readouts. "An adapter should do the trick." "I'll need an hour." "I will assist," she replied without hesitation. He almost protested. Delegates weren't supposed to dirty their hands with mechanical work, but something in her tone left no room. So they worked side by side. She handled the tools with precision, her long fingers deft, her movements almost balletic. Gail found himself glancing sideways more often than he should. Every tilt of her head, every subtle shift of her shoulders radiated elegance beyond human capacity. "You fascinate me," she said suddenly, voice soft but direct. He blinked. "Sorry. Your species," she clarified, eyes studying him as though he were a specimen. "So robust." Gail laughed, half embarrassed. "That's a polite way of saying clumsy brutes compared to your people." "Not at all," she corrected, lips curving into a smile that revealed teeth just a shade sharper than human. "There is beauty in strength. On Vidia, we value complementary attributes." Her words stirred something in him he couldn't name. He ducked his head, focusing on the adapter, until the coupling finally clicked into place with a satisfying hiss. "Try it now." The ship's systems hummed, lights stabilizing. Liriana glanced at the readings, then at him. Approval shone in her violet eyes. "You are efficient." Years of practice keeping this old station alive, he said, gathering his tools. He expected her to leave, then duty calling her elsewhere. Instead, she lingered. Perhaps you would join us later, she suggested, for cultural exchange. Understanding between our species is important. He swallowed. Sure, I'd like that. Over the following weeks, Gail found himself summoned again and again to assist the Vidian delegation. Sometimes the issues were legitimate faulty interfaces, mismatched frequencies. Other times the problems seemed almost too trivial to require a commander's expertise. Yet each time Liriana was there welcoming him with that calm confidence that unsettled and captivated him in equal measure. Their conversations drifted beyond engineering. She asked about Earth, the oceans, the forests, the variety of human foods. He in turn asked about Vidia, learning of their customs, their philosophies, the way their society celebrated diversity of union rather than restricting it. He learned that Vidians were not bound to their own kind. In fact, genetic variety was revered. One evening, seated with her in the observation lounge, as stars stretched endlessly before them, she spoke with a candor that left him breathless. "My people bond for life," she said, hands resting lightly on the table between them. "But we are not limited to our species. Diversity strengthens us." Gail nearly choked on his drink. "Are you proposing something?" Her laughter was like wind chimes caught in a warm breeze. "I am merely explaining, though I find your reaction encouraging." 3 months after their first encounter, Gail stood in a chamber draped with silver cords and the faint perfume of alien flowers. Before him, Liriana extended her hands. A thin silver thread wound between their fingers, binding them together as their vows echoed in both languages. It was simple, almost austere by Earth standards, yet profound. According to Vidian custom, they were now united. By Earth law, they were as good as married. He never imagined love would find him in the cold void of space, least of all with a woman from another world. Yet here she was, filling a void he hadn't known existed, teaching him that connection could be stronger than the gulf between species. Their life together settled into rhythm. Gail continued his endless work in the bowels of the station, keeping failing systems alive. Liriana coordinated trade negotiations with a grace that impressed even the most stubborn human officials. And in the evenings when duties were finished, they explored each other conversationally at first, then physically, discovering surprising similarities and fascinating differences. To Gail, every moment with her was a revelation. Her laughter when he explained Earth humor, her fascination with the simplest human traditions, the way her touch carried both warmth and a subtle electric thrill. For the first time since he arrived at Nexus, Gail no longer counted the days until his contract ended. He had found something worth staying for, someone that changed everything. And yet, in the quiet after their shared nights when the hum of the station seemed to fade, he often wondered what unforeseen challenges awaited. Because nothing this extraordinary could come without a price. Life aboard Nexus Station transformed in ways Gail Harper could never have predicted. Before Liriana, his days had blurred together, an endless loop of repairs, maintenance reports, and recycled air. After her, the station became something more than a metallic husk drifting in the void. It became the stage where he discovered love in the most unlikely of forms. At first, he tried to keep their interactions discreet. Engineers and diplomats did not often mix, and whispers traveled fast in the cramped corridors of Nexus. Yet concealment proved impossible. Liriana's presence drew eyes wherever she went, and the sight of her walking beside a grease-stained human commander became a topic of speculation. "Harper's gone native," one technician muttered as Gail passed by. "More like gone alien," another replied with a chuckle. He ignored them. Let them talk. What mattered was the truth he felt each time Liriana's hand brushed his, each time her violet gaze lingered a second too long. She was more than curiosity, more than exotic allure. She was his partner, and the bond between them only deepened with time. The Vidian concept of courtship was both familiar and alien. There were no elaborate dances of flirtation, no coy evasions. Instead, there was openness, honesty. From the start, Liriana spoke plainly about her intentions. "Among my people," she explained one evening, as they shared a meal of synthesized Earth cuisine in her quarters, "to pretend disinterest is considered dishonest. If we feel attraction, we acknowledge it. And if the other person doesn't feel the same, Gail asked, twirling his fork idly. Then we accept it and move forward. To linger on unreciprocated desire is considered unhealthy. Gail smirked. Sounds more efficient than human dating. She tilted her head amused. Perhaps, but less poetic perhaps as well. Humans seem to savor uncertainty, or torture themselves with it, he admitted. That night when she leaned close and kissed him for the first time, there was no hesitation, no pretense, just a certainty that made his pulse race. Their union was sealed 3 months later in a ceremony that struck Gail with its simplicity. No cathedral, no lavish garments, no endless list of guests. Just a room adorned with silver cords, faint incense curling through the air, and words spoken with solemn conviction. 2 elders of the Vidian delegation presided. Liriana extended her hands and Gail placed his in hers. A silver thread was wound around their joined palms, cool against his skin. With this cord, the elder intoned, "You bind your paths together. Where one walks, the other follows. Where one stands, the other defends. By our custom, your lives are joined." Gail met Liriana's gaze as they repeated the vows. In that moment, he felt a surge of certainty unlike anything he had ever known. It wasn't just love, it was a commitment that transcended culture, language, even biology. When the thread was removed, they were considered bonded, married by human understanding. Gail left the chamber with a wife, and though the thought felt surreal, it also felt right. Life together on the station settled into a rhythm both strange and comforting. By day, Gail continued his work in the maintenance sectors. The converters, conduits, and life support modules demanded constant attention, and he gave it with renewed vigor. Knowing he had someone waiting for him transformed the endless grind into something purposeful. By day, Liriana navigated the labyrinth of diplomacy. She was tireless, moving from negotiation to negotiation, her voice carrying calm authority that impressed even the most skeptical human commanders. She spoke of trade routes, energy exchanges, cultural programs, all with the quiet conviction of someone shaping the future. And by night, they returned to each other. Their evenings became a sanctuary. Sometimes they shared simple meals, laughing over Gail's attempts to teach her Terran idioms. Other times, they explored the station's observation deck, standing side by side as alien constellations glimmered beyond the viewport. Yet more often than not, the evenings ended in each other's arms, exploring the boundaries of desire and tenderness. For Gail, intimacy with Liriana was unlike anything he had experienced. Her touch carried a warmth that lingered, her scent, a faint blend of ozone and blossoms. The differences between their bodies fascinated him, but what truly astonished him was how naturally those differences fit together. He learned the subtle signs of her pleasure, the way her eyes shimmered brighter when she laughed, the soft trill in her throat when his fingers brushed the sensitive ridges along her shoulders. She in turn delighted in discovering the quirks of human physiology, her curiosity boundless, yet never clinical. It was exploration, not conquest, a mutual unraveling of mysteries. Outside their quarters, the galaxy continued its slow grind of politics and power. Rumors circulated that Vidia's entry into the Galactic Alliance was not without controversy. Some human officials distrusted their psychic abilities, fearing manipulation. Others questioned whether such close ties could dilute Earth's cultural identity. Gail heard the whispers, even the accusations that he had been compromised. "You spend too much time with them," a fellow officer warned one afternoon. "Careful, Harper. You don't want people thinking your loyalties split." "My loyalties to keeping this station from falling apart," Gail shot back. But deep inside, he knew his heart was no longer bound solely to Earth. Still, he refused to regret it. Each night when Liriana's head rested on his chest, when her steady breathing filled the silence, he felt more at peace than he ever had back home. The differences in their cultures fascinated him. Humans, he realized, often romanticized exclusivity as proof of love. Vidians saw exclusivity differently, not as betrayal to deny it, but as limitation. "Our bonds," Liriana explained, "are meant to strengthen family and community. A union between two souls is sacred, yes, but it also extends outward, weaving connections that benefit all." Gail frowned. "So, fidelity isn't expected?" "Fidelity is expected," she corrected, "but fidelity to truth, to trust, to family unity, not to artificial constraints. We celebrate connections that strengthen the whole, not just the pair." He tried to process that. On Earth, the idea of sharing intimacy outside of marriage was scandalous. Yet here in Liriana's world, it was not betrayal but tradition. For now, he pushed the thought aside. Their bond was enough, the differences could wait. The station crew gradually adapted to their union. Some offered congratulations, others awkward silence. Yet Gail noticed a change in how people treated him. Diplomats who once dismissed him now approached with guarded respect, aware that his voice carried weight through Liriana. Engineers whispered that he had one foot in two worlds, a bridge between species. The truth was, Gail himself felt caught between identities. No longer just human, not quite Vidian, but something new. And with that realization came unease, because the deeper he sank into this new life, the more he suspected challenges awaited. One evening, as they shared wine in the dim glow of their quarters, Gail voiced the fear gnawing at him. "Do you ever think," he asked, "that this is too fragile? That one misunderstanding could shatter it all?" Liriana set her glass down and reached for his hand. "All unions are fragile, Gail, even those between humans alone. What matters is not the fragility, but the choice to nurture strength." Her words calmed him, though doubts lingered. He didn't yet know that her wisdom carried heavier weight than he imagined, that soon she would ask something of him that tested the very core of his beliefs. But that night, wrapped in her arms, he let himself believe in the promise of their bond. For Gail Harper, Nexus Station had become something unrecognizable from the lonely assignment he had accepted months earlier. It was no longer just a waypoint of trade and treaties. It was home. And in Liriana, he had found not just companionship, but a mirror reflecting humanity's potential, adaptable, resilient, capable of forging connections where none seemed possible. He could not yet see the storm gathering beyond their quiet nights. He could not know that the traditions of another world would soon collide with the values of his own, forcing him to confront questions of love, loyalty, and the very nature of fidelity. All he knew in that moment was that he was no longer alone in the cold expanse of space. And for the first time in years, that was enough. For 3 months, Gail Harper lived in the glow of a love he had never expected to find. His days were filled with the grind of engineering, tightening bolts, recalibrating in converters, patching endless leaks in the station's overworked power grid, but his nights belonged to Liriana. And those nights were more than reprieve. They were transformation. But one night, everything shifted. It began innocently enough. They lay tangled in sheets, the soft glow of the station's ambient lights casting pale lines across their skin. Liriana rested against his chest, her silver hair spilling like liquid metal over him. The rhythm of her breathing matched the distant hum of Nexus's systems. Peaceful, ordinary. Then she spoke. "Gail," she said softly, her tone different from the teasing, affectionate cadence he had grown accustomed to. "There is something I must ask of you." He brushed his fingers through her hair. "Sounds serious." "It is." She pushed herself up on one elbow, violet eyes locking onto his. "My sister Nalia has recently come of age. According to our customs, it is the responsibility of newly bonded pairs to guide younger siblings in matters of intimacy." For a heartbeat, Gail simply stared at her, convinced he had misheard. "Guide them? What?" In matters of intimacy with males, she clarified calmly, as though describing a routine household task. Gail bolted upright, the sheets falling to his lap. "You mean you want me to your sister?" Liriana's expression did not change. "Yes." The silence that followed was suffocating. Gail's mind reeled, caught between disbelief and horror. Of all the cultural differences they had navigated, dietary customs, ritual, greetings, political hierarchies, nothing had prepared him for this. "Liriana," he managed, voice low, "that's not just a difference, that's unthinkable. Where I come from, sleeping with your spouse's sibling isn't a tradition, it's betrayal." Her hand touched his arm, gently steadying. "I understand your perspective, but in Vidian culture it is not betrayal. It is an honored tradition, one that strengthens family unity. Nalia must learn confidence, and it is considered dangerous for her to seek such knowledge from strangers. Who better to guide her than the man I trust most?" He pulled away, standing and pacing the small quarters. "This isn't just about culture, Liriana. This goes against everything I was raised to believe about fidelity, about marriage. You can't just ask me to share our bed with your sister." She watched him, unflinching. "I do not ask lightly. I ask because it is necessary." "Necessary?" he demanded. She nodded once, Nalia arrives tomorrow with the next delegation. Please consider it. Gail stared at her at the calm certainty in her eyes and felt the floor tilt beneath him. What had he gotten himself into? The next morning he awoke with a knot in his stomach. Sleep had evaded him, his mind trapped in circles. Liriana moved with serene efficiency, dressing in her diplomatic uniform as though nothing had changed. You're troubled, she observed. That's putting it mildly, Gail muttered. She sat beside him, taking his hands. Our cultures differ, yes. But consider this, what you see as infidelity, we see as devotion to family. Intimacy to us is knowledge that should be shared where trust is strongest. He shook his head. I need time to think. Of course, she said, gently pressing a kiss to his cheek. But perhaps meeting Nalia will help you understand. Her certainty unsettled him more than her request. Throughout his morning shift, Gail struggled to concentrate. He crossed wires twice, earning concerned glances from his human colleagues. You all right, Harper, Rodriguez asked, leaning against a conduit. Just cultural differences with the wife, Gail muttered. Rodriguez chuckled. Man, I thought dating outside your hometown was complicated. You're in a whole different league. If only he knew. At precisely 1400 hours, Gail stood with Liriana in Docking Bay 3 as the Vidian shuttle descended. His palms were slick, his chest tight. He felt like he was about to face a firing squad, not meet his sister-in-law. The shuttle door hissed open and several Vidians stepped out. Among them, he spotted her immediately. Nalia. Her resemblance to Liriana was undeniable: emerald skin, silver hair. But where Liriana radiated confidence, Nalia seemed softer, less assured. Her hair was intricately braided down her back, her eyes a paler violet, almost shy. She moved with caution as if uncertain of her place. When her gaze met Gail's, she dipped her head in a bow. Honored brother, she said, her voice gentler than Liriana's. I am pleased to finally meet you. Likewise, he managed, throat suddenly dry. Liriana beamed at them both. Nalia will be staying in the diplomatic quarters adjacent to ours. She has joined the delegation as a cultural attaché. I look forward to learning about humans. Nalia added, a shy smile flickering. My sister speaks highly of your species and of you specifically. Gail flushed. Well, I hope I can live up to the hype. That evening, the three of them shared dinner in Gail and Liriana's quarters. Conversation flowed more easily than he expected. Nalia proved curious and intelligent, asking endless questions about Earth customs. So humans mate exclusively with one partner? She asked, at one point, head tilted in genuine curiosity. Gail nearly choked on his drink. Well, not all humans practice monogamy, but yes, most marriages are exclusive. Fascinating, Nalia murmured. And is this exclusivity satisfying? Liriana shot her a warning glance. Perhaps we should discuss other topics for now. But the question lingered in Gail's mind long after the plates were cleared. Later, Liriana excused herself to take a call from Vidya, leaving Gail and Nalia alone. The silence was suffocating. My sister explained the tradition to you, Nalia said, at last, her eyes fixed on her glass. Gail nodded stiffly. She did. You're uncomfortable, she observed softly. That's an understatement. I don't wish to cause discord in your union, she said quickly. If it troubles you, I will not press the matter. It's not that simple, Gail sighed. In human culture, what Liriana suggested would be considered wrong. Even if everyone agreed, it would still be seen as betrayal. Her brow furrowed. Even if it strengthened family bonds, even if it was meant to protect. Even then, he confirmed, humans were possessive of our partners. She tilted her head. Yet your species engages in casual intimacy before bonding. Is that not contradictory? Gail opened his mouth and closed it. She had a point. Our customs aren't always logical, he admitted. They're shaped by history, by religion, by expectations. As are ours, she said quietly. On Vidya, we believe intimacy is a form of knowledge exchange. The first experiences are particularly important. To share them with family rather than strangers is considered a gift. Her words unsettled him, not because they tempted him, but because they carried their own internal logic. Before he could respond, Liriana returned, her expression troubled. What's wrong? Gail asked immediately. The High Council has accelerated the negotiations, she said. They're sending additional delegates, including Morton. At the name, Nalia's face paled. Morton, Gail repeated. A high-ranking diplomat, Liriana said carefully. And Nalia's former suitor, Nalia whispered, eyes downcast. Gail frowned. Former. The council rejected his suit when they discovered his methods, Liriana explained. He uses mental manipulation techniques that can influence emotions, create sensations that aren't real. Nalia's voice shook. He was persistent. A surge of protectiveness flared in Gail. Did he hurt you? Not physically, she said quickly, but his influence lingers. His techniques prey on inexperience. That is why this tradition matters now, Liriana said, gripping her sister's hand. Nalia must understand true connection before Morton arrives. If she remains unprepared, she is vulnerable. Gail felt the weight of it settle on his shoulders. Suddenly, this wasn't about strange customs or cultural misunderstandings. It was about protecting someone from a predator. When does he arrive? He asked, voice hard. 3 days, Liriana said. Not much time. Gail turned toward the viewport, staring at the endless stars. His stomach nodded. Whatever he decided, it would change everything. That night, while Liriana slept peacefully beside him, Gail lay awake, eyes fixed on the ceiling. His thoughts twisted in circles. Was he really considering this? Could he? Every value he had grown up with screamed against it. Fidelity, exclusivity, the sanctity of marriage. To cross that line felt like betrayal. And yet, the thought of Morton sinking his claws into Nalia filled him with rage. The idea of her being manipulated, her first experiences, tainted by deceit, was unbearable. Perhaps this tradition wasn't madness. Perhaps it was protection. Perhaps it was necessary. But if he chose it, he would be stepping across a line he could never uncross. The name lingered like poison in Gail's mind, Morton. He repeated it silently, as though familiarity might dull the menace. But nothing about the stories Liriana and Nalia shared over the next hours softened the edges. If anything, the details sharpened his fear. Morton was more than a suitor spurned. He was a manipulator of minds, a practitioner of techniques the Vidian High Council restricted to temple guardians and healers. To use them in courtship was not just frowned upon, it was predatory. And yet the council had never formally punished him. Too valuable, Liriana explained. Too connected. He was the kind of man who could walk into a room and sway half the delegates before anyone realized their opinions had been bent. Now he was coming here. To Nexus. Gail's communicator pinged later that night. Alone in the quarters while Liriana attended a late session with fellow envoys, he hesitated before answering. Computer access, cultural database, Vidian mating rituals, classification level 2. The screen came alive with lines of text and diagrams. He scrolled quickly, reading of the ritual of first knowledge, how a bonded partner guided the sibling of their mate through intimacy, creating neural pathways that ensured resilience against manipulation. His stomach tightened. It was all there, just as Liriana had said. Computer access, Vidian mental manipulation techniques, classification, level 3. The request triggered a warning, restricted data, authorization required. Override, Gail muttered. Harper Gail, Commander, authorization Delta 79. The system hesitated, then yielded. The files chilled him. Mental techniques capable of creating false sensations, layering artificial emotions, even implanting suggestions that could last years. Those without prior intimate connections were particularly vulnerable, their neural pathways unformed, easily rewritten. Damn it, he whispered, slamming the console shut. He could no longer dismiss the ritual as a bizarre tradition. It was a shield, a weapon against men like Morton. But could he, a human, truly step into that role? The following evening, the sisters asked to meet in a secluded chamber within the diplomatic wing. Nalia looked pale, her hands trembling as she folded them in her lap. He's already reaching for me, she whispered. Even from across space. I feel threads pulling at my thoughts. Liriana sat beside her, pressing her forehead gently against her sister's. A faint glow flared where their hair mingled silver against silver. Better, she asked softly. For now, Nalia replied, though fear lingered in her eyes. Gail's fists clenched. How long can you hold him off like that? Not long, Liriana admitted. Family contact creates a temporary barrier, but it fades quickly. The only lasting defense is the formation of true pathways through the ritual. Nalia's gaze flickered to him, shy, frightened. I would not ask this of you, honored brother, but I cannot face him unprotected. Gail drew a long, shaky breath. His mind screamed against it. His heart pounded with protest. But the image of Morton's unseen threads crawling through her thoughts. No, he could not stand by. Then we do the ritual, he said, voice firm. Both sisters blinked at him, surprise mingling with relief. Are you certain, Liriana asked. I'm certain of one thing, Gail growled. I'm not letting him touch her mind again. Preparations began the next day. The sisters chose a secure room deep in the station's emergency shelter, plain isolated, shielded from surveillance. Nalia sat on the edge of a narrow bed clothed in a simple white shift that contrasted starkly with her emerald skin. Liriana stood beside her dressed in ceremonial robes inscribed with silver patterns. The ritual of first knowledge is sacred, Liriana intoned, voice steady, carrying the weight of tradition. It is not simply physical, it is the creation of truth within the mind, pathways that cannot be erased by falsehood. Nalia looked up at Gail, her eyes clearer than before but still shadowed with fear. I am grateful, honored brother. Gail felt a strange mix of emotions, protectiveness, unease, even attraction. He despised himself for acknowledging. He was a soldier, an engineer, a husband. Yet here he stood about to step into alien customs that twisted every human notion of fidelity. Before we begin, Liriana continued, I must perform the sister's blessing. She cupped Nalia's face between her hands, murmuring words in Vidian that Gail's translator failed to parse. Then she pressed a kiss to her sister's forehead, turning next to Gail. And now the bonded's acceptance. She placed her hands on his chest, eyes searching his. Do you accept this sacred responsibility, Gail Harper? His throat tightened, but his voice did not waver. I do. Her lips brushed his in a deep grounding kiss before she led him to Nalia. Then we begin. I will guide. You will protect. She will learn. What followed defied every expectation Gail had carried into the room. It was not simply an act of passion. It was ritual, measured, deliberate, layered with meaning he barely grasped. Liriana remained close, guiding with words and touch, ensuring the rhythm followed ancient patterns. Nalia trembled at first, hesitant, but gradually relaxed under the assurance of her sister's presence and Gail's gentle steadiness. There were moments of awkwardness, yes, stumbling over cultural gestures, missteps that made all three laugh despite the gravity. But there were also moments of profound tenderness. And beneath it all, Gail felt something stirring beyond the physical, a current running between them, threads of thought weaving tighter with every heartbeat. At one point, as Nalia clutched his hand, her violet eyes widened. The fog, it's clearing, she whispered. Liriana smiled faintly, brushing sweat-damp strands of silver hair from her sister's forehead. Do you feel him still? Nalia shook her head. No, his threads are gone. A surge of fierce relief coursed through Gail. For the first time since this ordeal began, he believed the ritual might truly protect her. When it ended, the three of them lay together in silence, bodies tangled, minds humming with a resonance Gail could not explain. It was not just physical release, it was communion. He had crossed a line, yes, but in doing so he had forged something greater than taboo. The peace did not last. 3 days later, Morton arrived at Nexus Station. The grand reception hall glittered with artificial starlight, its high ceilings echoing with chatter as delegates from 12 worlds mingled. Gail stood in dress uniform beside Liriana and Nalia, trying to ignore the suffocating collar at his throat. He's here, Nalia whispered suddenly, her voice taut. Northwest corner. Gail followed her gaze. Morton stood taller than most Vidian's, shoulders broad beneath his formal attire. His face might have been handsome if not for the cold calculation in his eyes. Even across the room, Gail felt something, a pressure at the base of his skull, probing, testing. He stiffened, jaw clenching. Stay focused on us, Liriana murmured, sliding her hand into his. Remember the pathways. They are stronger. Together they moved through the crowd, exchanging greetings, smiling for appearances. But Gail never took his eyes off Morton. When finally they approached, the Vidian diplomat's smile was thin, his gaze sliding from Gail to Nalia. Ah, Morton said smoothly. The famous human-Vidian union. How progressive of our council. Nalia has no need of your mentorship, Gail interjected before the sisters could speak. Morton's violet eyes snapped to him, and the pressure in Gail's head spiked into stabbing pain. Images of doubt flashed, visions of betrayal, whispers that he did not belong. But they slid off his mind like water on wax. The pathways held. Morton's expression faltered just slightly. Interesting, he murmured. Gail smiled tightly. Human brains are full of surprises. We're stubborn that way. The diplomat's facade cracked for an instant, revealing the fury beneath. Then he straightened mask, returning. This discussion would be better continued privately. Not happening, Liriana said coldly, producing a small data crystal. The council already has your neural scans. Evidence of unauthorized probing. Whispers rippled through the delegates nearby. Morden's eyes blazed, but he said nothing. With a sharp turn, he stalked away. Gail exhaled slowly. That was too easy. It wasn't, Liriana replied grimly. He's retreating to regroup. Next time he won't bother with subtlety. Her words proved prophetic. Later that night, a searing blast of psychic force slammed into Gail's mind, dropping him to his knees. Around him, Nalia and Liriana cried out in pain, clutching their temples. Morden had abandoned pretense. This was open war. But Gal reached for Liriana's hand, who reached for Nalia's, forming a circuit. Energy surged between them, their bond amplifying. The pain receded, replaced by a strength none of them could explain. Together they pushed back. The resulting shockwave rippled across the hall, shattering glasses, making every Vidian cry out in disorientation. Morden stumbled, disbelief etched across his face. Impossible, he snarled. Humans cannot channel our energies. Guess you picked the wrong human, Gail spat through clenched teeth. The diplomat vanished into the chaos, but Gail knew this was far from over. Morden had declared war not just on them, but on the fragile piece of Nexus itself. And Gail, bound now to two sisters by ties deeper than marriage, knew the fight had only begun. The reception hall still reeked of ozone from the psychic backlash when the emergency klaxons began to howl. The AI's voice boomed across the station. Alert, critical system failure detected in primary life support. Backup systems engaged. All personnel to emergency stations. Red lights strobed across the hall, painting every face in alarm crimson. Delegates clutched their heads, still shaken from the mental shockwave. Panic rippled through the crowd like fire through dry grass. It's him, Gail muttered, scanning the chaos. It has to be Morden. Chief Murray, the station's head of security, shoved through the crowd. Commander Harper, what the hell's going on? Morden, Gail snapped. Mental assault, now sabotage. On what grounds? Murray demanded, skepticism warring with the chaos unfolding around them. On the grounds that he nearly cracked every Vidian brain in this hall, Gail shot back. Liriana stepped forward, producing the crystal again. I have evidence. Neural scans, logs of his illegal probes. Murray hesitated only a moment before barking orders into his comm. Security team's priority search. Detain diplomat Morden. Then to Gail, engineering needs you, Commander. Captain's orders. Systems are failing across 3 sectors. Gail cursed under his breath. Of course they were. He glanced at the sisters, Liriana steady, Nalia pale but determined. Stay together. Stay visible. Don't let him isolate either of you, he ordered. Liriana caught his arm. Be careful. He will be desperate now. I know, Gail said grimly. Then he turned and sprinted for the engineering decks. Engineering was chaos incarnate. Consoles spat warnings in angry red script, oxygen levels dipped in residential sectors, and the outer rings were freezing. Captain Reyes stood at the main control hub, jaw clenched. Harper, thank God. Someone's locked us out of environmental systems. A cascading failure protocol's running, it's bypassing all safeties. Let me see, Gail said, sliding into a terminal. His fingers flew across the interface, diving through layers of code. His blood ran cold. This isn't just sabotage. This is surgical. Whoever did this knows our systems inside out. Can you stop it? Reyes barked. Yes, but not from here. The main systems are compromised. I'll need to reroute through the auxiliary processors in Section 12. Reyes grimaced. Take a team. No, Gail said sharply. Morden's gunning for anyone who tries to fix this. I work faster alone. Before Reyes could argue, Gail was already heading for the hatch. The corridors grew colder as he descended. Frost formed on the walls where temperature regulation had failed. His breath fogged the air. Every step echoed with the weight of urgency, thousands of lives balanced on his success. His comm crackled. Liriana's voice came through, taut with strain. Gail, Nalia senses Morden moving towards Section 12. He's coming for you. Of course he is, Gail muttered. Tell her thanks for the warning. I'll deal with him. We're coming, Liriana said firmly. Negative, too dangerous. We're stronger together. Nalia's voice chimed in, steadier now, threaded with newfound confidence. What happened in the hall proves it. Alone you'll fall. With us, you'll stand. Gail wanted to argue, but deep down he knew they were right. Fine, meet me at Junction 12B and stay alert. They converged at the junction. The sisters had shed their ceremonial gowns for practical jumpsuits. Silver hair tied back, emerald skin stark under the red emergency lights. They looked less like diplomats and more like warriors. Nice outfit change, Gail remarked, forcing a grim smile. Formal gowns aren't practical for hunting rogue diplomats, Liriana replied. Together they advanced toward the auxiliary control room. The door stood ajar, a bad sign. Weapon drawn, Gail eased it open. The room seemed empty at first glance, processors humming steadily. He crossed to the main console, fingers flying. 5 minutes. That's all I need. You'll have less than one, a cold voice answered. Morton stepped from behind a bank of servers, a device in his hand. Wires dangled, lights blinking. Step away, human, Morton sneered. This device will reduce this chamber and everyone in it to slag. Gail didn't even look up. That's not a bomb. That's a power coupling with wires taped on. Morton faltered for just an instant. Enough confirmation. Now, Liriana, Gail barked. The sisters moved as one, circling, then lunging. They seized Morton's arms, and the instant they touched, Gail felt the connection flare again, energy crackling between them. Focused like a spear. Morton screamed as his own psychic power was turned inward, reflected back through the circuit they formed. His device clattered uselessly to the floor. Hold him, Gail ordered, finishing the override sequence. The terminal chimed. Life support stabilizing. Environmental controls returning to normal parameters. Relief washed through him. He tapped his comm. Harper to security. Morton contained in auxiliary control, section 12. Send a team. As they waited, Gail crouched before the kneeling Vidian. Why Morton? Why risk war? Why sabotage a station full of innocents? Morton's eyes blazed. Because your kind is a disease. You spread corrupt, dilute everything you touch. This union of yours, this perversion of tradition, it will infect my people until nothing remains of what we are. Gail shook his head in disgust. That's not infection. That's evolution. That's survival. Blasphemy, Morton spat. You think you've won? You've only delayed what's coming. Security stormed the chamber, then seizing him. Even dragged away in restraints, Morton's gaze promised vengeance. But for the moment, he was beaten. 3 days later, Nexus still bore the scars of his sabotage. Systems had stabilized, but trust had not. The Vidian Council dispatched Elder Thalin, head of their science council, to oversee the investigation. The medical bay became a research hub. Gail, Liriana, and Nalia sat tethered to monitors, neural activity charted in glowing holograms. This is unprecedented, Thalin murmured, eyes wide. Human neural architecture should be incompatible with Vidian resonance. Yet here we see perfect adaptation. Dr. Cooper, the station's human chief medical officer, pointed at the displays. Their patterns don't just align, they complement. Symbiosis. Liriana reached for Gail's hand, squeezing gently. I told you our bond was special. Special is one word for it, Gail muttered, uneasy under the scrutiny. What triggered this adaptation, Thalin mused. The ritual alone has never produced such results. Perhaps combined with Morton's assault and Harper's natural resistance, a perfect storm, Nalia offered softly. Indeed, Thalin agreed, and the implications are enormous. Imagine what such bonds could mean for our species' cooperation, advancement, unity. Gail shifted uncomfortably. Or new weapons, he said darkly. No one disagreed. That night, in the quiet of their expanded quarters, Gail slumped onto the couch. So let me get this straight. I'm in a 3-way marriage with alien sisters. Our brains are wired together, and the council wants to parade us around as proof of interspecies harmony. Liriana curled beside him, amused. Essentially, yes. Nalia joined them, more confident than ever, settling on his other side. And we are stronger for it. Through the bond, he felt their agreement, the steady pulse of trust, affection, even desire. It was no longer just words. It was truth shared across 3 minds. For a brief moment, he let himself relax, cocooned in the impossible family he had stumbled into. But unease lingered because he knew Morton's words carried one truth: this was only the beginning. The confrontation came sooner than expected. The council convened a grand assembly aboard Nexus to formalize Vidia's integration with the Alliance. Delegates packed the chamber, banners of 24 worlds unfurled. Gail stood in dress uniform between Liriana and Nalia, their presence a living symbol of unity. And then the pressure returned. A psychic shove at the edge of his mind, subtle at first, then searing. He staggered, gritting his teeth. Around him, others winced, clutching their temples. Morton. He had escaped custody. The chamber erupted in chaos as delegates shouted, some collapsing under the mental assault. Link hands, Gail shouted, grabbing the sisters. The circuit formed instantly. Energy surged, their bond flaring brighter than ever. Morton's power slammed into them like a tidal wave, but this time they pushed back together. A blinding burst of psychic force exploded outward, rippling through the chamber. Lights flickered, glass shattered, delegates cried out. And Morton, standing defiantly at the center, stumbled, his control broken. "You can't stop me!" he screamed, blood trickling from his nose. "I am Vidia's future." "No," Gail growled, stepping forward, voice echoing with the amplified resonance of their bond. "You're its past, and the future belongs to those who stand together." With one final surge, they unleashed everything: the stubborn resilience of humanity, the grace of Vidia, the unity of three souls bound as one. Morton collapsed, writhing before security swarmed him. This time there would be no escape. Afterward, silence settled over the chamber like the hush after a storm. Delegates stared at the trio with a mixture of awe and fear. "What just happened?" Captain Reyes muttered. Elder Thalen rose, voice ringing with authority. "What happened is proof. Proof that our species can not only coexist but combine. What they have forged is unprecedented, and it may be the key to our future." Applause swelled, hesitant at first, then thunderous. Gail stood between the sisters, exhaustion etched into every line of his face. But through the bond, he felt their pride, their love, their certainty. They had survived the storm, but greater challenges lay ahead. And he, a simple engineer from Earth, had become the center of a story that would reshape two worlds. 6 months passed since Morton's final defeat. Nexus Station had stabilized, but nothing within its walls or within Gail Harper's life was the same. What had begun as a reluctant assignment, a 2-year contract of grease and frustration, had transformed into something far greater. He had come to Nexus as an engineer. He remained as the linchpin of an alliance. And now, as Dr. Cooper's scanner hummed in the quiet of the medical bay, Gail realized that transformation was only beginning. "Impossible," the doctor muttered, for the third time, eyes locked on the display. "And yet the evidence is right here." Nalia sat on the examination bed, her hands folded protectively over her abdomen. Her eyes glimmered violet in the low light, wide with disbelief and wonder. "Is something wrong with the baby?" Gail asked sharply, his hand tightening around hers. "Wrong? No," Dr. Cooper said, shaking his head in awe. "Just unprecedented. By every model we know, human and Vidian DNA should be incompatible. But this child is thriving. A perfect hybrid." Liriana's hand joined theirs, cool and steady. "Our bond has done this," she whispered, reverent. "It has rewritten what is possible." Gail stared at the holographic projection of the tiny form, heart pounding. For weeks he had sensed the faintest presence in their shared link, a spark delicate but undeniable. Now the truth crystallized: he was going to be a father. To a child that should never have been possible. News traveled fast. Within days, the council summoned them to explain, to study, to celebrate. Scientists pored over scans. Elders debated the cultural and spiritual implications. Some hailed the child as a miracle, a bridge between species. Others muttered about dangerous precedent, about purity diluted. But one fact silenced dissent: the fetus was healthy and growing stronger by the day. "Our child will open doors neither of our species imagined," Liriana said firmly during one such session. "Our child," Nalia corrected gently, her voice carrying both steel and tenderness. Gail said nothing, simply resting his hand over theirs. Already through the bond, he could sense the spark more clearly, curious, reaching alive. The three of them weren't alone anymore. At night, in the privacy of their quarters, the weight of it pressed down. Excitement warred with fear. Gail had always prided himself on planning on troubleshooting before crises hit. But how could anyone plan for this? No one's ever delivered a hybrid before, he murmured one evening, pacing. What if there are complications? What if the child— "Stop," Liriana interrupted, her voice firm. "Fear cannot be our guide. We face this with courage as we have faced everything." Nalia smiled faintly, resting a hand on her still flat stomach. "She will be strong. I can already feel her. A presence small but certain." Gail blinked. Female Nalia confirmed softly. The bond tells me. Gail's chest tightened. A daughter. Their daughter. The thought terrified him, and yet it filled him with a joy so fierce it hurt. Opportunities swarmed them in the wake of the news. Earth's Interspecies Relations Department extended an invitation. Help establish a cultural exchange center in Geneva, be the faces of successful human-Vidian integration. The Vidian Council offered a research facility on Vidia Prime dedicated to studying mental bonding. And then Captain Reyes himself arrived at their quarters looking uncharacteristically nervous. I've received word from both Earth Command and the Vidian High Council, he said. They've approved a joint project, a new station. Purpose-built for families like yours. A diplomatic and scientific outpost. He smiled faintly. They're calling it Genesis Station. The name hit Gail like a physical blow. Genesis. Beginning. A place where children like theirs could be born not in secrecy but in pride. When Liriana asked, her voice steady, though her eyes shone. Construction begins in 3 months, Rhea said. They want you three to oversee it. Engineering, cultural protocols, everything. It'll be ready for habitation before the baby arrives. And so half a year later, Gail stood at the observation window of Genesis Station, watching as the final panels slid into place. Unlike Nexus, cobbled together from outdated modules, Genesis gleamed with purpose. Human practicality met Vidian elegance in every curve. Its rotating rings promised stability. Its green-hued plating shimmered under artificial starlight. It was a dream given form. At his side, Liriana and Nalia pressed close, their hands twined with his. Nalia's pregnancy had rounded her figure, her emerald skin glowing with vitality. Through the bond, Gail could feel their daughter's mind, a faint spark brightening with each passing week. She'll be born among the stars, Liriana murmured, her voice tinged with awe. Between worlds, Gail said softly, the first of many. Already 20 other human Vidian couples had applied for residence. Researchers clamored for assignments. The council whispered of a future where Genesis would not be anomaly, but model. What had begun with a single shocking request now stood as the foundation of a new chapter in galactic history. The child's birth was both ordinary and miraculous. Ordinary in the sense of blood, sweat, and breath. Miraculous in the sense that it should never have been possible. When her first cry rang through Genesis's medical bay, Gail felt his knees weaken. Liriana and Nalia flanked him, exhaustion and elation radiating through the bond. Their daughter's skin gleamed a pale emerald flecked with golden undertones. Fine silver fuzz crowned her head, and when her violet eyes blinked open for the first time, Gail felt the connection snap into place, a fourth thread woven seamlessly into their bond. She knows us, Nalia whispered, tears slipping down her cheeks. She feels us already. Gail reached out his hand, trembling as he cradled the impossibility made flesh. Welcome to the world, little one, he murmured. Or worlds. Liriana pressed close, resting her forehead against his. She is proof, she said softly. Proof that our love is not aberration but foundation. In the months that followed, Genesis thrummed with life. Families arrived, researchers charted discoveries daily. The council's rhetoric shifted from cautious optimism to open pride. Yet not all accepted. Echoes of Morton's ideology lingered in whispers and veiled looks. Some humans muttered about purity. Some Vidians spoke of contamination. But Gail knew change never came without resistance. He looked at his daughter, tiny fingers clutching his thumb, mine brushing against his with the faintest spark of curiosity, and felt certainty steal his spine. Whatever storms lay ahead, they would weather them. Because family wasn't defined by biology alone. It was defined by choice, by courage, by connection. One evening, as they sat together on Genesis's observation deck, the three of them gazed out at the stars. The child slept peacefully in Nalia's arms, her soft breathing syncing with the gentle hum of the station. Gail exhaled slowly, letting the enormity of it all wash over him. Funny, he said. When I took the assignment on Nexus, I thought it was a step back in my career. Just fixing converters on a worn-out station. The universe has a sense of humor, Liriana replied, smiling faintly. Nalia's eyes softened as she stroked the baby's hair. Do you think others like us will follow? Gail thought of the families already arriving, of the spark their story had lit across two civilizations. If not yet, he said, then soon. We've shown it's possible. He paused, glancing at them both. And when they come, they'll need a place, a beginning. Genesis Liriana whispered. Exactly, Gail said, drawing them close. As the stars stretched endlessly before them, Gail Harper, once a weary engineer, counting down days until his return to Earth, stood at the center of something larger than himself. He was a husband, a protector, a father. And above all, he was proof that humanity's greatest strength was not conquest or invention, but connection. The stubborn refusal to accept division, the unshakable belief that walls could be bridges if only someone dared to step across. Here's to new beginnings, he said softly. To family, Nalia added, her voice rich with love. To us, Liriana finished, completing the circle. Through the bond, the fourth voice, their daughters pulsed in quiet agreement. And as Genesis Station spun silently against the velvet backdrop of space humanity, NVIDIA began a new story together, bound not by fear or tradition, but by the courage to embrace the impossible.